Okay, today we are learning about poetry. So, in your performance coach workbook, please turn to lesson 2, which begins on page 14. So, on your own, you were supposed to read about different elements of poetry, and we actually studied that at school before we left. So, you guys should have a little bit of a background knowledge on this topic. So in the reading, they go over the structure, different sounds of poetry like rhyme, rhythm, and repetition, figurative language like alliteration, metaphor, simile, personification. We kind of touched on most of that at school. Point of view, theme, talked about that at school. And then they have the different kinds of poems: lyric, epic, narrative, limerick, free verse, haiku, and ode. Also, things we've talked about before. Okay, so this should pretty much be kind of like a review. However, I don't have a teacher book that gives me the answers like sometimes I might have. So I'm doing all the work with you. And I thought some of these questions were pretty challenging. So make sure you follow along and you pay attention. So if you got them wrong, you can correct them. Because I even paused at some of them and was like, whoa, this is a little bit tricky. Okay. So listen as I go over them so that you can make sure you got them right and you understand why each choice is correct. Okay, let's get started. The first poem you were supposed to read was Escape at Bedtime. And you are to answer the first question, which talks about how the poem discusses the dog, the hunter, and Mars in the night sky. These names all relate to characters in Greek and Roman myths. Based on the information, what is the best conclusion you could draw? All right, so I thought this was a little tough. Um, let's go over the choices and then we'll talk them out. A. The dog, the hunter, and Mars are constellations. B. The Greeks and Romans saw the same objects in the sky. C. Many planets and constellations got their names from characters in myths. And D. The words dog, hunter, and Mars are from the Greek and Roman languages. So based on what we read in this poem, we should have realized that the poem is mostly about the stars in the night sky. So A says the dog, the hunter, and Mars are constellations. At first I was like, that sounds kind of right because I believe they said the dog and the hunter were constellations, but then I see that it says Mars is a constellation, and I know that Mars is a planet. So I'm going to put an X on A so that I can remember I don't think that's the correct choice. Let's look at B. The Greeks and Romans saw the same objects in the sky. Is there anything in the poem that is really telling us that the Greeks and Romans saw the same things in the sky? Not really. I'm going to put an X on that. I don't think it's the best. C. Many planets and constellations got their names from characters and myths. Well, we talk about Mars, which is a planet, and we talk about the dog and the hunter, which are constellations. And then in the question, it says these names relate to characters in Greek and Roman myths. So we can say, yeah, that's a good choice. That many planets and constellations probably got their names from characters and myths. But let's look at D just in case. The words dog, hunter, and Mars are from the Greek and Roman languages. There's not a lot that says that these words come from those languages. It just says it comes from those myths or stories. So the correct answer is going to be C, that many planets and constellations got their names from characters in myths. So you really have to work through each answer choice and read the question multiple times to really figure these out. They're not easy. Okay, next, read this line from the poem. They saw me at last and they chased me with cries. Explain what this line reveals about the speaker of the poem. All right. So this one I was like, what are they really asking me to do here? So I went down to the hint, and the hint says, notice the pronouns the speaker uses. Does it seem like he is an outsider describing events that happened to someone else? So I took a look at the pronouns. The pronouns here are they, me, they, me. So do you think the speaker is talking about something that happened to someone else? No. And how do I know that? Because he's using the word me. So the pronoun me is a really big hint. So in my answer, I wrote that the speaker is telling us about his own experience looking at the stars. He uses the pronoun me. And this pronoun is used in first person point of view. So I think what they're asking you for in number 2 is to tell them, is this happening to the speaker, the narrator, or are they telling about what happened to someone else? So make sure you write on number 2 something about the point of view, which is first person, and that the speaker is telling about his own experience and uses the pronoun me. All right, moving on to number 3. Ooh, this was a fun one. So number 3, which of the following is true about the first stanza? Choose all that apply. So this means that you're going to choose more than one answer. So we really have to look at every single choice. So A, lines 1 and 3 rhyme. Lines 2 and 4 rhyme. So if you look at your poem, lines 1 and 3 are the lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out and high overhead and all moving about. Do those rhyme? Yes. Out and about rhyme. What about 2 and 4? Through the blinds and the windows and bars, there were thousands of millions of stars. That rhymes, bars and stars. So circle A because that is true. Let's look at B. All the lines have the same number of stressed syllables. So this is tricky. We practiced this at school though. This was when I had you guys go up to the board and put the little marks over the syllable that was stressed. And we actually had a lot of fun with it because it can be fun. It's kind of like sing-song music-y, so it can be fun to do. I was doing this last night and I was like, I was getting into it. So here's what I'm talking about. These stress symbols that you guys used to put on the board, and we had a lot of fun doing that. Okay, so this, if you can follow along with me on your poem that looks like this, and I'll also post a picture of this on Dojo so that you can see how I marked the stressed and unstressed syllables. But if we go over them, let's just go over lines 1 and 2. So, the lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out. So you have to figure out which syllables are being stressed. The lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out. Those are the stresses. So there are 4 stressed syllables on the first line. Go to the second line. Through the blinds and the windows and bars. So there's 3. Okay, so that's what creates the meter, the rhythm, those stressed and unstressed syllables. So B says all the lines have the same number of stressed syllables. Is that true? Well, let's look at it again. The lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out. That's 4. Let's look at line 2. Through the blinds and the windows and bars. That's 3. So no, they do not have the same amount of stressed syllables. So put an X on B. C. Each stanza has 8 lines. So we learned this at school, that stanzas are like paragraphs for a poem. So if we take a look, you can number the lines in your stanza well, you should do that because it's a good way to follow the poem. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is one stanza, 8 lines. Let's look at stanza 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines. So is letter C correct? That each stanza has 8 lines? Yes. So make sure you circle C. D, lines 1 and 2 rhyme. Lines 3 and 4 rhyme. Let's take a look. 1 and 2. The lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out through the blinds and the windows and bars. Out and bars do not rhyme. Let's look at 3 and 4. And high overhead and all moving about, there were thousands of millions of stars. About and stars does not rhyme. Okay, so we need to put an X on D. Go to E. Lines 2, 4, and 6 have the same number of stressed syllables. All right, let's look. 2, 4, and 6. So 2. Through the blinds and the windows and bars. That's 3. 3 stressed syllables. Line 4. There were thousands of millions of stars. That's 3. And then we're looking at 6. Nor of people in church or the park. Yes, so E is true. You can circle E, that lines 2, 4, and 6 all have the same number of stressed syllables. And finally, F, each stanza has 5 lines. Well, we should know right away that's wrong because we just counted each stanza and they have 8 lines, okay? So we know that F is incorrect. So you should have circled your answers for number 3, A, C, and E. Part B. Write 2 to 3 sentences that explain the effect that is created by the poem's use of rhyme and rhythm. All right, so you're just using basically A, C, and E to tell how that creates rhyme and rhythm. So in this answer, I wrote that the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables creates a beat or meter in the poem. So what I'm talking about is the lights from the parlor and kitchen shone out. That creates the meter and the beat by stressing that one syllable and unstressing the next. It makes the poem kind of sound like a song. I put that. And then I also put that the rhyming words help the poem flow in a rhythm. So out and about and bars and stars and tree and me and park and dark, all that rhyming really helps it sound like a song. Okay, so make sure that your part B has some good examples of how rhyme and rhythm is created in this poem. Next, we're moving to number 4. The following question has 2 parts, part A and part B. Read the lines from the poem and the question that follows. As the crowds of the stars that looked down upon me and that glittered and winked in the dark. What kind of figurative language is used? All right, let's go through them. A, allusion. We didn't talk a lot about that at school, but this is not allusion. Allusion is when you refer to another story or book or something like that in your poem. B, metaphor, which is comparing two things without like or as. C, personification, giving non-human things human qualities. Or D, simile, comparing two things using like or as. This would be C, personification. And then why? Because the poet is giving human qualities to the stars. So it's saying that the stars look down at the speaker and that they winked in the dark. Well, we know that stars don't have eyes, so they're not actually winking. So this is the poet giving human qualities to something that is not human. So in part B, it says explain what the poet means. make sure you include something about how the poet is giving non-human qualities to the stars. Stars don't have eyes, so they can't actually look at someone or wink. But make sure you also add that what the poem or the poet is trying to say is that the stars are sparkling in the sky. So it's just a fancier, more exciting way of saying that the stars are all sparkling in the sky. Okay, let's go to the next poem. On page 22, The Spider and the Fly. Number 1. This question has 2 parts. The words winding stair appear 3 times in the poem. That's repetition because they're being repeated. Underline these words in the poem. So make sure you go back to the poem and you're underlining where it says winding stair. Part B. In the poem, the spider calls his web the winding stair. What kind of figurative language is this? So this type of figurative language is B, metaphor. Why? Because the spider is comparing his web to winding stairs. He does not use like or as, because if he used like or as, if he said, my spider web is like winding stairs, that would be a simile, because they compare two things using like or as. But it doesn't use that. It just says my spider web is a winding stair. So that is a metaphor. So number 1 is B, metaphor, and make sure you underline winding stair in the poem because that's part A. Following? I hope so. I hope I'm not going too fast, but you can always pause and rewind or whatever you need to do. That's the beauty of me teaching from my computer. But I miss you all. Okay, let's go to number 2. The following question has 2 parts. Once again, let's look at part A. Said the cunning spider to the fly, dear friend, what can I do to prove the warm affection I've always felt for you? So which Latin root below best helps you figure out the meaning of the word affection? Guys, I really thought this wasn't that hard because you're basically looking for which Latin root is in the word affection. Is echo in the word affection? No. Is fact in the word affection? No. Is affect in the word affection? Yes, with an A. Is effect in the word affection? No, not the one with the E. So we know this answer is C. Affect means feeling. In this case, the AFFECT means feeling. Part B. Write a definition of affection. Your definition should be something like affection is a feeling of liking and caring for someone or something. So showing positive feelings and caring towards someone or something. Make sure you have feeling in there because that was the answer we chose in part A. Okay, let's go to 3. The following question has 2 parts once again. Part A, what kind of poem is The Spider and the Fly? Ooh, we got to look back. So A, lyric poem. If we look back in the part where we were supposed to read about poetry, lyric poems are short song-like poems. Was this poem short? No. Was it song-like? Maybe a little, but it definitely wasn't short. So we're going to put an X on lyric poem. Narrative poem. It's a poem that tells a story. Did this poem tell a story? Yes. So let's keep that in mind and go to C. Limerick. This is a 5-line poem. Well, this poem has more than 5 lines, so we can put an X on C. D is free verse. Free verse were those poems that we learned about that do not have any rhyme and usually like no rhythm. They're just like a free-for-all. So this had rhyme, so that's not correct. So D is wrong. So we know we have to circle B. This is a narrative poem. All right, write a sentence that supports your answer. Well, here's what I wrote. The Spider and the Fly tells a story with a beginning, middle, and end. So part B, you should have written something about how this poem is telling a story. Number 4. Part A. What is one theme of this poem? Oh, I thought this one was a little, this was probably the hardest one. Because I had to kind of pick apart and figure out which ones would be good themes. So A, the dangers of spiders. That one right away I thought that was not a good theme. So I put an X on A because that's just too small. This poem is about more than just the dangers of spiders. It's got a bigger message than that. So let's look at B, the dangers of vanity. So if you circle the word vanity, you should have asked someone or looked up what that means, which means to have too much pride in yourself or your appearance. So, kind of like full of yourself and full of your looks and not really caring about personalities, but more about what's on the outside. So, we'll go back to that. C, the deceitfulness of people who flatter others. So, I hope you circled deceitfulness and asked about that one. That word means misleading or uh, deceitful, kind of like lying, misleading people. Um, so people who flatter, what does flatter mean? You've probably circled that too. It means to give praise or compliments, um, usually about appearance, but it can be about other things, but that's what flattery means. So we need to figure this out because D is the dangers of listening to flattery. This was hard, like I said. I think overall, my choice that I chose was B, the dangers of vanity, because in the poem, the spider is trying to get the fly to come into the web, and the fly says, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I'm smarter than that. But then the spider says, I have a mirror in my web that you can look at yourself and see how beautiful you are. And you have the most beautiful eyes and crown on your head and whatever else he was saying to try to flatter the fly. And the fly fell for it and ended up getting caught in the web and then eaten by the spider. So I think the overall lesson they were trying to teach is like, don't get too involved in how you look and your appearance and all of that. And instead, use your brain and make good choices based on your overall gut feeling and what you think is right. Okay? Part B, circle the line that best supports your answer. So go back to your poem and circle a line that best supports that vanity or taking too much pride in how you look can really hurt you in the end. So I circled the part that said it was on, it started with thinking only of her brilliant eyes. Bottom of page 23. Thinking only of her brilliant eyes, her green and purple hue. Thinking only of her crested head, poor foolish thing. So the fly was only thinking of her looks and herself, and she got all caught up in it and ended up flying right into the web, and that was the end of her. Okay, so that's what I put for there. You might have circled a different line, but just make sure it goes with the theme that the dangers of vanity can lead to problems. So 5. Your eyes are like the diamond bright. What kind of figurative language is this? So it's not illusion. Metaphor compares two things, but it cannot have the word like. Metaphors don't have the word like when comparing. This says, I know it's backwards, but your eyes are like the diamond bright. I'm reading backwards now. Yay, I have a new talent. So no, it's not a metaphor. C, personification. Giving human qualities to things that are not human. Not really. D, simile, yes. This number 5 is D because it's comparing the fly's eyes to diamonds and using the word like. Explain what the spider means. So this is the bottom part here. This is a simile comparing the fly's eyes to diamonds using the word like. The spider means that the fly's eyes sparkle bright like diamonds. He's trying to flatter her and trick her into the web. Who knows if he really means it? He's just trying to get her in his web so he can eat her up, right? Okie doke. What else we got? We got the last page. Oh, here it is. Okay, and this is the written response. How does the poet use structure and figurative language to tell a story in The Spider and the Fly? So we're only looking at the spider and the fly for number 6. Give specific examples of rhyme, rhythm, figurative language. Okay, you might need to take some notes on this one because I'm going to go through some of the elements of poetry that the poem uses. So remember we had that whole list of elements of poetry and we learned a lot about it. It was really fun learning about that at school. So I'm going to go through some that were used in this poem. So you might need to pause and take notes and add to your response and things like that. So first of all, rhyme. This poem uses rhyme. Lines 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on and on and on. Those all rhyme. So if you look at lines 1 and 2, fly and spy rhyme, and then stare and there rhyme, vain and again, it's again, but they say it like again, so it rhymes. High and fly, and on and on and on. The 1 and 2, 3 and 4, that type of rhythm or rhyme pattern. Okay, so rhyme is used. Next, rhythm. Stressed and unstressed syllables create a pattern or meter in this poem. So I'm not going to go through the stressed and unstressed syllables, but they are there to create rhythm. Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly. 'Tis the prettiest little parlor that ever did you spy. Definitely has stressed and unstressed syllables creating rhythm, pattern, meter. Those are all kind of words that mean the same thing, okay? Let's go on to figurative language. So figurative language has a bunch of different little types under it. So this is like a category, and then there's different types of figurative language. So one type of figurative language that's used in this poem was the metaphor. We talked about how the spider compares his web to a winding stair. So that is a metaphor. He also says that his web is a parlor and come into my little bed. There were a lot of metaphors in this poem, actually. Okay? So make sure you write down metaphor. And then the examples would be the winding stair. He uses the example of a parlor and also his little bed. And you might even find more in there. Okay? There's a lot of metaphor in this poem. Next, we have alliteration. 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 You guys kind of had a hard time with this, I remember back at school, but I really like alliteration. Alliteration is when you repeat the first letter sound of each word. So the example that I wrote down from this poem, but I'm sure you could find more. The example I wrote down was, you are witty and wise. So that's WW, witty and wise. So it's when you repeat. So some of the examples I gave were like, Sally sells seashells by the seashore. That's all the sh sound. Okay, so it's alliteration. See if you can find any more examples of that. I'm sure there's some in there. Personification. That was another form that was used. Throughout the entire poem, personification is used because a spider is talking, and so is a fly, and we know that spiders and flies do not talk to us, or talk to each other as far as we know. So that is giving human qualities to insects, things that are not human. So it's definitely personification throughout. Repetition, that we can think of when we say repetition, we think of repeat. So whenever things were repeated in this poem, for example, winding stair, that's repetition. Also, I wrote down that they use the phrase never, never wake again. So never was repeated. I'm sure you can find more examples of that in there and when it repeats. Next, we have simile. Oh, I like this one simile. I'm sure, like I keep saying this, but I'm sure you can find more than what I just found because this is a pretty long poem and there's a lot of figurative language in it. But the one I found was the simile when he said that he was talking about her eyes. And I remember what he said, but I can't remember. Anyway, he was saying how her eyes were beautiful and pretty and all this stuff. And then he says, my eyes are dull as lead. So dull eyes being compared to lead. And he's using the word, or they're using the word as, so that means it has to be a simile. That was a good one. My eyes are dull as lead. Yours are so beautiful. Okay. Then we have onomatopoeia, and that one, we had fun with that before. It's spelled onomatopoeia. And this can also be found, all these forms of figurative language can also be found on pages 15 and 16. Actually, I don't think they did do onomatopoeia, but we talked about it at school. Onomatopoeia is when we do the sound words, boom, crash, bang. So see if you can find more in the poem, but what I found was buzzing. And buzzing is a sound word. So that is all I have for you. I know this was a long lesson, but you know, I really like poetry. It's fun, and I know we had fun doing it at school, so I wanted to kind of get into it and have some fun with it. So I hope you guys learned something or reviewed something that you're like, oh yeah, I remember doing that at school. I remember that. And make sure you go over all those pages and you correct anything and take some notes so that you can be a master at poetry now. Okay? All right. Hope you're doing great. Have a good rest of your day. And I will see you tomorrow for lesson 3. All right. Bye.